Thank you so much, Andrea. I'm very happy to be here and presenting this topic. I can talk about mindfulness ad nauseum. And so I'm very glad that I have an audience that loves to hear about it. So my name is Elmika Henderson. As Andrea said, I'm an educational psychologist and mindfulness educator. I am currently the primary counselor at Bishop Mackenzie International School in Malawi. So like tucked into southern Eastern Africa near Mozambique. I've been practicing mindfulness for over 10 years and teaching it for the last 6 years to students and teachers since I've been working internationally. I also use mindfulness to kind of incorporate this contemplative pedagogy into my counseling lessons and just any of the coaching that I'm doing with teachers. I'm also a Cancer and I like long walks on the beach and, but I really hate the sticky sand. So yeah, just a couple things about me, we're all friends here. I love to dance. And fun fact, dancing is a really good way to kind of regulate your nervous system. And if you're stressed out, that's like my most favorite way to kind of de-stress and kind of calm down a little bit. I use it with my students a lot. We call it a mindful dance party. So we dance to music that has kind of a high BPM, so beats per minute. And then we pause for a moment and we connect with ourselves to kind of regulate our breathing, but also, helping them kind of calm down a little bit if something has been going on. And so I love it. So feel free to use that idea. So why mindful communication? In my years of practicing mindfulness and teaching even, I noticed that the values of clarity and kindness and compassion that I felt so strongly while meditating would often evaporate when there's this conflict with people or there's a difficult situation. And we find those sometimes in schools that this is our third school year dealing with COVID. And so, even when I've come into this school, it's almost palpable, the stress and the nervousness and the anxiety around what's going to happen, which kind of makes it difficult for people to communicate effectively. And then that lack of communication and compassion and understanding is what creates a hostile work environment. So I wanted to shift kind of this mindful communication conversation to ways that we as counselors can help cultivate this positive school culture. ASCA says that we are the agents of change. And so I wanted to, explore ways that we can talk about that. So before doing all of that, I would like to check in with everyone and see how you're doing. And, just before we kind of start, taking a moment to just kind of set our intention for today. So I invite you to just kind of settle into where you are. You can choose to close your eyes if it's comfortable. If not, just find a spot on the floor, the table, wherever you are, just to focus at or soften your gaze. And just taking some breaths. Doesn't have to be deep breaths, but just connecting to this present moment. Maybe move your head from one side to the other. Just settling into your body, feeling the force of gravity, your body connecting with your seat, and just breathing and observing whatever is happening right now. And for whatever reason that made you sign up for this workshop, I just want you to take a deep breath in your nose. And on the out breath, I want you to just release that from your thoughts. And on your next breath, I want you to set an intention for our time today. It can be to learn a strategy or two. Maybe it's to deepen your understanding of mindfulness. Or maybe it's just to be fully present and attentive for the next hour or so. Just keep connecting to that intention. And now I invite you to take 3 deep breaths. And on the third breath, open your eyes and bring your awareness back into the room. So in our discussion today, we are going to be exploring the foundations of mindful communication: presence, intention, and attention. We are going to talk about the role of presence, the foundations of how they relate to, our orientation and dialogue, where we are, why we're here, is our body grounded in the present moment. We'll also talk about human needs and the intention to understand. We'll talk about the role of stress and also handling feelings and reactivity, but then also talking about what does a positive school culture look like, and also your role in transforming a school. So before we begin, I have some guiding principles that I would like you all to be mindful of as we move throughout our discussion today. You can think of these as helpful reminders for your practice in mindful communication after today as well. They are: communication is a flow of understanding, and we lead with presence to establish a solid ground for connection. The more presence, the more reliability we can know what is true for ourselves and have space to hear what others are saying, regardless of the circumstances. When we focus on what matters, this helps create a mutual understanding and opens the field for more creative solutions. The more aware we are of our own feelings, the less likely we are to unconsciously react rather than consciously choose how we participate in a conversation. And attending to our own reactivity and judgments by grounding in the body can help us make wiser choices about what to say and when. So mindful communication. Communication is the process of interacting, creating understanding, and it involves so much more than what we say. It's also how we speak, the tone of our voice, volume, and pace, which transmits a wealth of information about how we're feeling, what we think of one another, and how much power we do or don't have. So it's about also why we speak. What do we want? What's our motivation? And of course, it includes listening, of how we listen and why we listen, or if we're listening at all. Mindful communication integrates mindfulness, embodied awareness, and nonviolent communication, which was founded by a man named Marshall B. Rosenberg. Mindful communication really depends on our ability to be present. That's the foundation of mindfulness, speaking openly and honestly, listening deeply, and navigating the inevitable twists and turns of a conversation that will require a high degree of self-awareness. How many times have we been in a conversation with a teacher or with a parent, and we've been kind of thrown for a loop by something they said that we weren't expecting? So mindful communication helps us to kind of have to pivot. Andrea, you have a question?
I'm so sorry. I don't know if you're advancing slides. Maybe my screen is frozen. Are you moving forward in slides, or are you still on your first slide?
Mindful, can everybody see the mindful communication?
No. So sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's okay.
There we go. Now it's going. Yes. Okay, you've got it.
Okay. Hold on one second. I'm so sorry about that, you guys. So you can see it.
Yes, we can see it, and you could try to put it on present mode, and we'll see if it fills the screen.
It still does it.
There you
see
go.
It?
Yes, we can. Thanks so much, Malika.
No problem. Glad we figured it out. Okay. Can you see that it advanced now? Awesome. Okay. Thank you for letting me know, Andrea. So mindfulness, if you don't know, mindfulness is really just paying attention on purpose in the present moment without judgment. You don't need a meditation cushion or even more than a second to be mindful. Dr. John Kabat-Zinn who is kind of one of the first American researchers of mindfulness, he compared it to being behind a waterfall. So you're not under the waterfall, kind of being pounded with all of the, swirls of thoughts and emotions and sensations, nor are you trying to stop or change them, but rather you're behind the cascade, observing all of what's happening without any type of judgment or evaluation. Mindfulness can be a moment of being aware of an emotion. It can be a habit that you create. You can engage in a more intentional practice of mindfulness by using different forms of postures and activities, such as seated mindfulness, meditation, walking, mindful eating even. That's my favorite. It gives us, but what mindfulness does is it gives us back our lives. It's what allows us to enjoy the beauty of each moment and to be present to experience all that's happening with us. So the role of presence, we can see presence, just checking.
No, we're still on mindful communication slide.
It's not doing it. Okay, let me see. Okay.
Now it says present.
Yeah. Okay. It says my screen sharing is paused. I don't know what's. Hold on. Sorry, folks. I'm gonna stop that. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So now the role of presence. So presence is embodied mindfulness. It means that we are fully here and aware, and it's the prerequisite for everything else. So if we lose presence, then we're kind of on autopilot. And that's when we get into the situation where we are a bit reactive. We're likely to speak or relate in ways that might not be in line with what we want. And so we kind of have to stay attuned to how our automatic patterns are showing up in the conversations that we're having, especially when we're triggered or something difficult is happening. So we are trying to lead with presence. And before having that conversation, then we are making sure that we're doing some exercises or just being self-aware to knowing how we're showing up to that conversation. So have you guys ever tried to talk with someone who was distracted or someone who had pulled out their phone in the middle of your conversation? Or maybe you were the one that wasn't fully aware? What's that like? Like, how does that make you feel when someone isn't fully connecting? My son complains all the time because he's like, you're distracted, you're not listening to what I'm saying. But there's not a lot of communication happening, especially when we're talking about connecting with our colleagues and even our students. But on the other hand, when someone is giving you their full heart's attention, what does that feel like to you when you're in their full presence? It makes you more receptive to communicate and understand and work collaboratively on something than when you feel like that, that attention is being neglected. So we tend to, also get caught up in our words and our ideas in the emotion of a conversation, that we forget to kind of the simple steady of grounding our own presence, especially in difficult moments, can really make a larger impact on the overall situation of what's happening. So with mindful communication, we lead with presence, and broadly speaking, this is something that, for all of us, that it provides a foundation for our training in communication. And to engage with this, we really have to just slow down enough to see what's happening with ourselves and our speech. But presence also establishes ground for connection. So we're more actually, we're here for more options that we have for creating understanding with one another. So if we're present in the moment and not caught up in our, in our emotions and our feelings about what's happening, then we can come up with some more lasting solutions. So what helps you stay connected? And also considering what disconnects you from being present. So at this time, anyone who has anything to offer of what kind of helps you stay connected? And you I don't know. I can't see everybody's like hand or unmuting, but please feel free to unmute and just say what helps you stay connected or what disconnects you from being present.
I'll just read the chat, Omika, if that's okay.
Yeah,
Jackie
no, thank
says,
you.
Jackie's saying her breath helps her stay connected, and
Yeah,
Jihan is saying trying to be empathic.
nice.
Bethany's saying having a moment of focus before I meet with someone.
Mm.
And Kim is saying staying connected, my breath. She's already gone to disconnected, which is distracted brain. Yes, Kim, distracted brain. Oh, why? I love that. Why says I smile intentionally. Oh, that's a good one.
Nice. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for your responses. I've listed a few things that may connect you to presence: slowing down, breathing, like we said, time with a friend, being in nature, touch, music, my favorite, sunshine, rain, just even noticing the beauty of things. Things that may disconnect you from presence: stress, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. Feeling tired, being hungry, rushing, fear, wanting something, impatience, a perceived threat, or lack of safety. And so when we're talking about cultivating a positive school culture, when we feel that, when we are in a culture that we feel that isn't positive, so if it is a hostile environment, a hostile work environment, a lot of these things that are disconnecting us from presence are showing up. So there's stress, there are work demands, there may be this feeling of rushing, there may be a feeling of wanting something, so wanting to feel fulfilled in what you're doing, a perceived threat of losing your job maybe, or your contract not being renewed, or even just a lack of safety. So coronavirus has really kind of messed with our hierarchy of needs. And so when I talk to parents or even teachers about social emotional learning, the first thing I say to them is, you know, kids need to Maslow before they can bloom. That we need to make sure that the school is safe, that there is a sense of belonging, that they feel secure, that they feel supported. The same thing goes for us. It's difficult for us to show up for the kids, and it's difficult for us to be present when school doesn't feel safe for us. And I know that it's believed that it's just an occupational hazard, that we have to kind of forego ourselves to be able to show up for the kids. But I think it's the other way around, that we have to take care of ourselves first before we can be there for the children. So in our intention to understand, our intention is where we're coming from in a conversation. It is the heart quality or the vector that's driving what's happening. So if I want to speak to a parent or speak to a teacher about an intervention, my intention is to support the student. And so sometimes it may seem to the teacher that I don't understand what's going on with them. I'm not supportive of them. But if my intention is to support the student, then my focus is always going to be on that. But as educators and counselors, in trying to have that compromise, we have to understand their intention as well. And so they're coming and saying, and how many of you, just hands up, that you feel that as a counselor, you're seen as the fixer, that you are to take the kid and take them to your office and fix them and bring them back. Exactly. My mantra is, I am a helper, not a fixer. Yes, Bethany, you have a question?
Sorry, no, that was me raising my hand.
Oh, okay. You're like, yes, absolutely. So part of, mindful communication is not only looking at our motivation, but looking where someone else is coming from in the conversation and having that and understanding that. So if we're talking to students or we're talking to parents, if our intention is off, then they can feel that if we don't stay connected to why we're having the conversation, then that's how things go awry, and we end up talking about things that are unrelated, and we walk away feeling like, what just happened and what did we resolve? Or, you feel like that you're back at square one. So also looking at the intention to understand and making sure that we are trying to understand where someone is coming from rather than getting defensive. And so in my mantra of I am a helper, not a fixer, I tend to get defensive when I feel that the other person is just like, I don't care about interventions. I don't need you to tell me what I need to do. I need you to fix it. And so part of the work of mindful communication is understanding where they're coming from, what needs need to be met, and why it is that they're asking that. Maybe it's they don't feel equipped, they don't feel supported to be able to do these interventions, or they haven't been shown how it can actually work. And so that's where we try to understand the need and understand what what need do we need to fulfill before we're able to actually kind of connect and help. Sorry, I'm not ready to go on there. So another important part of mindful communication is becoming aware of and examining the communication training that we already have. So these are unconscious and learned patterns, maybe because they have been learned, it's really hard to kind of disconnect. But the good news is anything learned can be unlearned and retrained. So how is it that we've generally been conditioned? So for me, if I can share, for me, I'm really good with giving workshops and talking to parents and teachers about all the things that they should do. However, when there is difficulty that comes up or a conflict arises, I am conditioned in a way that I feel that if someone is doing something that I don't like, then I see that in terms of blame. So when my needs aren't being met, then I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with the other person. So let's say, for example, if a student doesn't follow our directions or do something that in the way that we needed to, or as often as we like, then students are seen as disrespectful or disruptive. We blame them or we label them. But take that same desire for someone to follow directions clearly and consistently, then we will say, okay, like they're trying, they're giving this effort, or we need to understand kind of the need that's happening. So if a student isn't listening to us, we kind of have to go back to Maslow and say, okay, what is keeping this student from being able to learn this thing or do this thing that I'm asking them to? And so part of this conditioning is starting to shift that and see what need needs to be met, or what is the intention of their actions, or the consequence that they're seeking if we're talking about functional behavior assessments. But starting to see like, what is that intention? What do they need? What's happening? Rather than looking at it in terms of them being wrong or right, or blaming them or labeling them. Does that make sense? Okay, awesome. So if I want someone to listen to me or to understand something that I have to say, then how useful of a strategy is it for me to blame them? It kind of creates this roadblock where I don't want to listen to them. I basically said, you know what, you're wrong. I don't think we can't really get any further. I can't tell you anything. And so we kind of have to find that way of reducing that criticism. So the way that we do that is really with presence and intention. That's the first two ways that we're really going to be able to understand those connections and have this collaborative problem-solving dialogue, whether it's with colleagues or with students. So the role of stress. So I want to talk first by normalizing what stress is. There's a book called The Upside of Stress that talks about kind of the benefits of stress and what it means for our bodies and for our nervous systems, and then ways that we can take that to our advantage. And so just kind of briefly summarizing, it really is that focus on self-awareness and understanding the ways in which stress shows up in our bodies and those triggers and those things that stress us out. So for me, I really, really hate being rushed. I really hate waking up late and feeling like that I don't have enough time to kind of like do my morning routine to be able to feel centered and ready for work. When I'm rushed, I forget things, or, you know, I'm very forgetful, especially like with traveling. If I'm rushing, then things get left behind, or I'm checking my bag like 37 times to make sure my passport is there, which is a whole nother stressor. And so if we think of stress differently, then we can attune to our bodies and our feelings to handle the ways that we react to it. So Martin Seligman said, you know, it's not the potential stressor. So it's not that meeting with someone or that conversation with a difficult parent, but how we perceive it that determines whether or not it will lead to stress. So taking, for example, a difficult parent. And we know now that the parent that seems difficult is really just a parent trying to express a need, a parent that is trying to understand what's happening with their kid. And if we look at it from that perspective, then we can approach it with a bit more empathy. And so one mindfulness exercise I like to do before those difficult meetings is to practice heartfulness. So when I was doing school psychology in Philadelphia, that's where I'm from, there was a parent that had 2 children in special education. And she was notorious for just being very challenging. And, you know, it was really hard to walk into those meetings with this kind of optimism and empathy. And so we had 2 meetings with her. So the first one was for her son. And so by the time the second one with her daughter rolled around, then the night before, I decided to do an exercise in heartfulness, where I allowed myself to think of all the things that could be challenging for her and saying, wow, okay, she has 2 children that are in special education. This is a very difficult system to navigate. What could she be feeling right now? And so then it was just really, you know, may you be happy, may you find peace, may you get understanding, you know, and just sending those good thoughts and those vibrations, if you will, to her helped me to walk into that conversation and walk into that meeting with a bit more empathy and understanding of what she needed in that moment. And so that's just one example of how you can kind of shift how you perceive a potential stressor. And so heartfulness isn't always it, but sometimes it's really just kind of understanding those difficult conversations with others. And so I speak a lot about difficult conversations, mainly because that is kind of the source of those negative or adverse school environments. That it's a lot of, you know, whether it's email communication and someone CCing the head of school or the principal, whether it is just really a difficult teacher that you're trying to communicate student needs to, it all really is grounded in that communication and that misunderstanding. So I want to talk a bit about kind of handling reactivity, because that's kind of when we are on autopilot, then we really kind of just go on that impulse, you know? So you start first by handling reactivity. You start first by monitoring your activation. So, which is learning about what the signs for you are when you begin to move in one of those, you know, stressful zones. So for me, my heart rate does increase a little bit. My breath kind of gets tight. And so I kind of sometimes put my hand on my chest or my belly when I recognize that I'm starting to kind of feel a bit anxious. But just looking at it, you know, monitoring your body and its reactions to things. Do you start to sweat? Do you start to clench your fist? Is there heat in your body that you feel? What are the physiological signs that you start to notice? Or even thoughts. What thoughts start to race? Like, oh no, this parent is going to bite my head off. I'm nervous about, you know, not saying the right thing or misspeaking. I can't tell you how many times that I have walked away from a conversation and said, did I say intrinsic or innate? And so it's like, you kind of like mix things up and overthink, you know? But what's happening inside is this kind of invitation to study and become aware of that signal that's telling you like, okay, this is a potential stressor. Like, you know, we might need to kind of take some breaths because we don't want you to go into automatic, you know, autopilot, and then just start reacting. Because when our sympathetic nervous system is activated, then who knows what's showing up. And so we are just in fight, flight, freeze mode. And, you know, especially if you are the fight type person, then your words are going to be sharp. You may not want to lay anybody out, but your words are going to be sharp. You're going to be very curt. You're going to be short. And that's really not conducive to what we're trying to accomplish here. Okay. The next one is kind of learning how to modulate it. So learning how to handle it, learning how to pause, how to ground, and how to disengage from what's happening in the moment. One of my favorite strategies is, especially, how many of you have had a teacher try to catch you in passing, especially a difficult one? The difficult ones never want to email, right? And so they always try and catch you in passing. And when I have these conversations, my favorite is to make an excuse to the bathroom, even start walking, because nobody's going to follow you to the toilet. If they do, like, that's highly disrespectful. But if you had, like, just say, listen, I gotta go pee, and then just walk away. That's kind of the polite way to get out of that conversation. But if you aren't able to escape, before responding, I just like to take a breath, a very long, pensive breath. And it just creates a little bit of space for you to process what's happening and what's been said, instead of being reactive. It feels weird because it's more like this. And then they're just standing there like, like, what is she doing? But it just really, with that pause, you know, you are creating that space, and you're able to ground yourself, and you're able to give your attention to what's happening. And you're also creating that container for whatever has been activating to subside. So also, one of the next steps is attending to the deactivation. So giving it a little bit of attention and giving it a minute, if you can, to try and just settle into what's happening and what you're experiencing. And then affirming the connection, stating to the teacher, listen, I really want to help. I really want to support you through this. I just need a moment. I just want to circle back at this. I want to come back a little bit later. And that's kind of requesting to stop. That if you feel that the conversation isn't really happening, it's not being conducive, it's not being productive at all, then you can say that, and, you know, take another long breath and just say, listen, this is not our intention. I feel like we're straying away from our intention, which is to help the student, or which is to, you know, help you create this safe learning environment. How about we kind of take a breath, let me do a bit more research, and then, you know, we can come back to see how we can better handle this. And so with handling our feelings, it's really just kind of attending to all of those things. So when you are, you know, noticing the activation, then what you're doing is basically naming those feelings, expanding your vocabulary. And so saying, I'm feeling, you know, agitated, I'm feeling nervous, I'm feeling, you know, slighted even. And saying, like, being able to feel those in your body, accepting them and being aware of them. And so understanding that, you know, sometimes our feelings really kind of knock us aback. So, you know, those little blow up dolls that, I mean, okay, so I'm dating myself. So, you know, those little blow up dolls that look like Bozo the Clown, and you hit it and there's like sand at the bottom, you hit it and it bounces down and it comes back up, and then you just keep doing that. With going through this practice of handling your emotions, so naming and identifying them, accepting and being aware of them, but then also being able to express them without blame or judgment, it's shortening that time from when the little blow up thing stays down and comes back up. It kind of shortens that feeling that we have, or the way that it allows our body or forces our body to respond and react to it. I should say that all of this never happens in the thick of that conflict, in the thick of that moment, right? It's practice that we have to do beforehand, so that when we're there, our body is used to it, we understand it. But our goal is to make sure that when that punching bag gets hit, it no longer hits the ground. It's a little bit stronger. It gets pushed a little off to the left or the right, but because we practice it, it doesn't really fall that far, which helps us to be centered a little bit more quickly. Okay, so what does a positive school culture look like? So in the chat, share your ideas. What do you think it looks like? What do you think it feels like? If you could dream and say, what if my school was a positive school culture? And not saying that any of you are part of one that isn't, but what would it look like? What would it feel like? Open communication, okay. Laughter and connections easily made, and are also across grade levels, subjects, ages, and stages. Awesome. Inclusive, diverse, no blame or fear of leaders. Good. Oh, yes. Teamwork, all staff caring about the academic and social emotional growth of students. Positive school culture has accountability in place so that everyone feels safe and translates into positivity. In everyone else's mind, it's structureless. It's just, you're there when you need you. So it's what happens. It isn't anything that needs to be discussed. Collaboration, spending time together in and out of school, holistic care that is not authentic, that's authentic, but not just about ticking boxes, respectful conversations in space, authentic conversations, positive intent, informal connections. Oh, these are awesome. Thank you. So when we talk about a positive school culture for students, right? These are the things that kind of show up. So we feel that students, in order to have a safe and positive learning environment for them, strong relationships are the foundation. We tell teachers, yes, you have to build rapport with these students before they will want to trust you and learn from you. High expectation, but also strong support, consistency and expectations for behavior, and regular collection for feedback followed by adjustments. These are all things that we need as well, that we need to have this kind of strong relationships. And like someone said, authentic ones, not ones that are, situational. So being in international schools, sometimes we're in a bubble, and sometimes it feels like that the relationships that we're building, we're friends with people just because that's kind of all we got. That we're either in a really small town, in a really small country, or we're just uncomfortable, branching outside of the school to make friends. International schools really are a microcosm of a small town. So everyone knows everybody, everyone knows where everyone lives. And so a lot of people find comfort in that, saying, listen, I'm going to be friends with them. But sometimes those friendships are challenging because you live and work with the same people. And so it's hard to kind of create those boundaries. I would also add boundaries, that it's really important to have those and to hold those. One of the first boundaries that I put in place whenever I go to a new school is the counselor does not get called to the classroom for any reason. That I need to create space between what is happening in the classroom and my response to it. Because if I go to that classroom, then I am going to be seen as the person that you go to when you get in trouble. And so having those high expectations. So my high expectation is that boundary, but also supports. So I'm not going to leave teachers out there. I'm going to make sure that you have the classroom management skills and you have the SEL, and I model in the classroom what that looks like so that you don't feel like you're left alone. The same thing with administration, that if admin wants you to do something or is expecting something, then they're also creating these supports for you to be successful, and also having a clear understanding of what success is. Consistencies and expectations for behavior. How many of you feel like that something happens to one person, but then another person doesn't? And it's just, we have teachers that you feel that there are some teachers that are really awesome and great and are meeting the standards, and others are just kind of there. Making sure that there's consistency in the evaluations that are being done, but also just with the expectations for everyone, making sure that it's clear and that it doesn't seem like that, there's favoritism happening. And also, regular connections, a collection of feedback, followed by adjustments. It's not enough to just ask, how are we doing? But also taking that feedback to make changes. So the big question is, okay, how do we influence this? How do we change any of this? So ASCA, the American School Counselor Association, says that school counselors are change agents and advocates for students, harnessing a belief in the synergistic development of the whole self. Through roles of advocacy, leadership, collaboration, consultation, and counseling, school counselors foster a constructive learning environment that addresses the needs of all students through programs that are culturally sensitive, comprehensive in design, and developmental in nature, and focus on prevention and intervention. And so these are things that we do already. There's social emotional learning, there's well-being programs, there's workshops for parents and teachers, there's collaboration with outside agencies. There's things that we're doing already that are working to promote a positive school culture, that we are the ones that shift it. We're the ones that keep the temperature on the school. We keep the pulse of everything that's happening. We're the ones that know everything because we are the secret keepers. And so we're the ones that can guide admin to what needs to change and what needs to happen. I'm fortunate that the school that I am in now, they're seeking to shift that. They're seeking to figure out what's happening with the school, how we can merge secondary and primary to be one school instead of two schools within a school. And they're looking at the counselors to understand that. And so we're the ones that's giving them feedback from teachers that we're collecting. And so not just a Google form, but we're having conversations. We're in the classrooms. We're understanding what's happening when admin isn't able to see everything. Because we're the ones going into the classroom with the kids. We're able to see the stress on the teachers when we walk in. Sometimes we're able to feel the stress of the teachers when we walk in. And so we are the ones that can provide that constructive feedback for them. One of the main things is we have to prioritize teacher well-being. So whenever I talk about social emotional learning, or I work on implementing an SEL program within a new school, I always start with teacher SEL. I always start with adult SEL. Before that year, before the SEL program is implemented, it is spent focusing on training the teachers and the adults on how to be present. There's this idea of mirror neurons, that if I haven't, woken up in the morning on time and I'm rushed and I didn't get my coffee and I walk into a classroom, the kids are going to pick up that my nervous system is dysregulated. And they are going to pick up on that, and their nervous systems are going to begin to match that. And so my patience is low and their antics are high. And that is not a good situation, right? So if I am self-aware and I have the skills and I have the training to recognize how I'm showing up in that classroom, then I'm able to contribute to the well-being in that classroom. I'm able to attend to myself. I can, if I'm a teacher, I can get my TA started and say, okay, listen, I'm gonna get the day started, get my TA to stay in the room with them while I go grab a cup of coffee and just take a breath so that I can be ready for the day. And having admin that understands that sometimes that needs to happen, but also training teachers in a way to where they know the why first. Because if you tell them, hey teachers, if you feel dysregulated, go get some coffee, then they're gonna try and abuse it, right? Or just, listen, I can't with these kids today. And so they're gonna take a step back. But if you start with the why and you say, listen, kids need to Maslow before they can bloom. We have to create this safe learning environment. It starts with us. We have to know how to regulate our nervous systems before we can teach them how to do that. We have to know how to give name to what we're feeling and to be able to speak that without judgment and share that with our students and say, listen, Miss Omika is having a bit of a day. Can you guys be kind to me? That's not a problem to do. And kids are amazing and compassionate. And so if you speak that to them and you let them know what your current state of being is, then they learn to say that as well. So that instead of acting out, and we're looking at them like, what is going on? They're able to say, listen, miss, I'm having a hard day. Can I just have a moment? And then you're able to say, sure, absolutely. Go use the calming corner. It's not a problem. So by prioritizing the teachers and the adults that are in the students' lives, then we're optimizing anything that we teach them in return. And that's gonna contribute to that positive school culture for both the kids and the adults there. So there are two programs that I know of. ASA, the Association for International Schools in Africa, they have partnered with Nestle. I do not remember what Nestle means though. But ASA has a Wellbeing for All program, but theirs is the Teacher Wellbeing Toolkit. And so what it is that counselors or wellbeing coordinators, they can sign up for this program. And I provided links in the document section to both of these programs. And so what it is that the wellbeing coordinator or the counselor, whomever is gonna lead it, signs up for this program, and then they present it. And so the best way is for it not to be compulsory, to just say, hey, whoever thinks they can benefit from it, then it's basically teaching teachers all of this stuff of how, what systems are in place make you feel supported. What are things that you can do to kind of further support that or support other teachers and things. So it's not just saying, in what ways does admin need to get better? But it's saying, how are we going to create this awesome and amazing school that the teachers and the students alike deserve? CASEL and the Office of Overseas Schools also has great resources for adult SEL and things that you can teach and all of that. And so if I find any more, then we'll have access to the Whova platform for a while. And so if I find any more, then I'll definitely insert that in there so that you guys can go back and reference it. So learning communication, and just especially mindful communication, it's much like learning a new language. It takes repetition, and the more frequently you practice, the more quickly you'll become fluent. So knowing even just a few words of a new language will help you begin to say what you mean. And I encourage you all to practice these skills just a little bit every day, whether it's through a formal exercise or just informal conversations. I like to practice on my friends who know and love me, and so they go easy with me, of just kind of strengthening that connection and coming with intention and presence. But even just 5 minutes a day of daily practice will have a tremendous effect over time, okay? It's kind of like, anybody who has Duolingo, that's always like, pinging you and sending you notifications of like, listen, you need to practice the skill. But at this time, are there any reflections or questions? Feel free to put them in the chat or to unmute yourself if you'd like.
Elmika, I did have one question in the chat about these programs that you're discussing, and it's from Jackie, and she's wondering, do you do this as a workshop for teachers and TAs, or do you just how long does it take maybe to teach one of these programs that you shared with us, or how do you do it? Can you give a bit more specifics about how you train the teachers in it?
So the Teacher Wellbeing Toolkit, that is it's intended to be over 5 or 6 weeks, but it can be stretched out. And so teachers generally meet like once a week. Some administrators, if you have like a PD day, then they allow that to happen during that PD day, so teachers don't have to stay after school or anything like that. Those happen over a matter of weeks. The adult SEL program, I think it happens the same way. You really can structure both of these any way that fits for your school. So it's not anything that has to happen kind of monthly or weekly even. At my school, there are 4 times during the year that we have on the staff meeting days that I am to do a wellbeing activity. But we're trying to fit in other ways, like even just 5 or 10 minutes of doing a wellbeing activity, so that it doesn't feel like the whole program is compulsory. But next year, when we begin to start talking about our SEL program, then that's when it's going to be a very strong focus. I'm going to be hitting them over the head with it. And so, but it really just depends on the needs of your school. If you force teachers to do it, then they're going to fight back. But if you slowly implement it in and you kind of be sneaky with it, then they're a little bit more responsive.
I put the links that you discussed, Elmika, I put them into the chat for those 2 programs.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, both of these are really great. Like Castle is an amazing resource. Like I'm a stan and I quote them everywhere I, can and everything. So yeah, I think that it really just, it really starts with us. If we're talking about trying to implement and create this positive school culture, it happens with boundaries. It happens with being consistent. And especially with teachers, they start to respect that and understand it. And then you see them implementing certain things. Especially I'm an advocate for modeling and showing teachers how it's done. It's easier than just giving workshops and talking to them and just saying, this is what you should be doing. But when we decided to implement in classroom meetings, that's how we sold it to them. And it's like, listen, SEL is the plate. It's not one more thing to add to a teacher's plate. It's the foundation of all of your teaching. And so when you learn these skills, then it will help you with your teaching a little bit better. Jihan, am I saying that right? Do you have a question?
Hi, Jehan. Yes. Hi.
Jehan.
I was curious about something you said about a boundary that you set in place, which was not to go into classrooms. And I was just wondering, did you mean like you wouldn't go and observe students, or you wouldn't go as a kind of intervention for a particular student? Or did you mean you would just not ever teach a lesson or get involved in that way? Or is it both?
No. So what I meant was often teachers will call and say, hey, I need the counselor here. The student is misbehaving.
All right. Okay.
And so the expectation, no, but I definitely do observations. I definitely have weekly or biweekly classroom meetings because we have like 19 classes. And so I do biweekly meetings with the students. And that's really where the modeling of classroom management and social emotional learning is happening. That I've asked teachers not to intervene with any type of like behavioral disruptions. Because I need them to see how I respond to it and how I regulate my nervous system when I'm thrown off. If there's a kid talking too much, or there's a kid playing around or throwing his hat in the air, I need them to see how I kind of do that very long breath. And sometimes with students that they're like, oh, okay, we need to stop. But and so, yeah, so definitely to answer your question, it was really just when they call for what they deem an emergency, when it's really something they could have managed, or it's a discipline thing that has nothing to do with me at all.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Oh, you're welcome. Why, you have a question? You're still muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much for what you're sharing with us. I don't have much problem when talking with the teachers in as far as the students are concerned. But when they come to me and they have issues with the management, sometimes I find myself in a position where I don't know what to say, because they come to you hoping that you can give them a solution to make them feel safer. Have you come across that? And if so, what direction do we take?
I do come across it. And I came across it a lot when I didn't know a lot about classroom management, because I'm not a teacher. And so I did a lot of learning and a lot of research, because I found that my goal is to be useful. And so when I felt like I wasn't, because I've learned that not a lot of teachers get classroom management training in their programs, which is so crazy to me. And so finding that it really is kind of the role of the counselor to help guide that and help coach that. What I would recommend to you is to find out as much as you can learn about it. A lot of it is just really, doing research, i.e. Google, and just really looking and saying, teacher classroom management and coming up with this Rolodex of ideas. The strongest one that I have done, or the one that it's easier for me to come off the top of my head, is initiating a call and response for students. So what I find a lot, the classroom management issue with teachers is mostly the students are talking and they don't get quiet when I ask them to, or I'm spending 5 minutes getting them calm. And so, well, I'll say the two things. So for teachers, they have to start with classroom agreements. And this is not just, I am the teacher and here are the rules of my classroom, but it's really sitting as a collective and saying, what are going to be the rules of our classroom? What are going to be the agreements that we have of how we're going to be in this classroom, how we're going to show up, how we're going to treat each other, and let the kids guide that so that they feel invested in what's happening. I've seen some teachers even put it on that that paper, like I forget what's the name, the easel paper, and they write all of the agreements and then the kids sign it. And so it's like a contract with them. But the other thing is a call and response. And so you go in and you say, with that agreement, you'll say, okay, well, if I need your attention, if I need to know that, or you need to know that it's time to learn, or we need to be ready, what is something that we can do? And so with kids, we've done Marco Polo, we've done, I've said Scooby-Dooby-Doo, and they're like, where are you? There's a lot of different ways. And so you present a few of them and say, okay, what works for our class? But I found that some teachers will just kind of automatically go to, 1, 2, 3, all eyes on me, but they haven't gone through the steps of teaching the kids. And so they're just like, oh, okay, you can count. but a lot of it is the foundation of classroom management is really having that connection with the students and understanding what their needs are in that moment. So you may have a class that is all over the place. You may have a class that is really kind of calm, but just really starting with that. And it's never too late to go back and just say, hey, we need to change this because it's really hard for me to teach. It's really difficult for other students to learn. So let's come up with some agreements. And so those are the two kind of off the top of my head. But I would say if teachers are needing more than that, then do some research, take some time and just, gather this little Rolodex for them. Okay. Andrea, you had a hand up?
Yeah, Jehan is piggybacking on or taking further what you're saying, why about teachers who come in and just kind of complain about admin or school policies. And I was just on an interview and that's one question they asked me. What do you do when teachers come in to complain about admin? So it's a thing, right? And I think also listening and holding space, you don't have to solve the problem. At least I can't change the admin. I can listen and hold space and I can say, how do you want to convey that to the admin? How do you want to do it? Do you want me to help you figure out how to convey that to the admin? Or is this just you need to kind of vomit it out and you need someone to hold space, right? But isn't there an expression like your urgency doesn't, just because you have an urgency, I don't need to react to your urgency. I don't know what the expression is, but
the expression is, the expression is your sense of urgency does not create an emergency on my part.
Yeah. And sometimes I think that's what they think we counselors are supposed to do is like, okay, you get go. And then you get caught up in it. You're like, okay, what do I do? And it's like, it's, I guess, going to the mindful communication, like, okay, what's this person's intention? I guess you could even say, what's your intention? Are you just wanting me to hold space and listen? Or is your intention for me to go take action for you? I mean,
one of the phrases one of the phrases I use is, do you need me to listen or do you want me to help you problem solve? And I use it with the kids all the time, that they come in and I hear them venting. And so before I say anything, I'm like, did you just need me to listen or do you need help problem solving? And 9 times out of 10, it's like, oh, I just need to get off my chest.
That's
But
great.
even with teachers, like teachers need that space. I would create a little bit of a boundary with that and remind them that you're there for the students, so that it doesn't become a thing of them coming to you and sitting in your office and complaining or venting. Some of the things kind of go into personal stuff, and it's just like, hey, like, I'm happy to lend a friendly ear. However, I just need to be clear that I'm here for the students. I have some wonderful resources to some online agencies that would love to talk to you for a nominal fee.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
you know,
yeah, exactly.
but it's like, I can't, I'm the school counselor, but for the kids, not the school. Yeah.
Yeah.
Berna, you have a question? Oh,
sorry.
sorry.
Just before you go, Berna, I was wanting to respond to Jackie, who also has another question in the chat, and I see we're running out of time, but Jackie, if you can't afford one of those programs at Almika, because I think some of the programs you have to pay for, or if you don't have time to create that, at our school, we just started the year with the 8 realms of wellness, and we asked the teachers to sit at tables. We explained the 8 realms of wellness, and then we had them kind of, you can do like a little quiz where you rank yourself. Which realm of wellness are you doing fine on, and which one is your lowest? And so then we had them at the table discuss with their table mates, what are they going to work on this year? What's their goal for which realm of wellness, if they felt comfortable sharing? Yeah. We had it all around the room. They all gave ideas on the different realms of wellness of how to be well in emotional well-being, physical well-being, fiscal well-being. And then at each faculty meeting after that, we said, for the first 5 minutes, can you turn to the person next to you and talk about where you are on your goal of wellness that we did at the start of the year? So that's not as in depth of what Almika is recommending, but yeah, I love those programs, Almika.
I saw the question. I was going to address it, Jackie. I do take a restorative approach. In fact, we are reframing our behavioral guidelines to have more of a contemplative discipline approach rather than you do this and you get punished. And so we are in the process of creating like a flowchart of, here are minor problems that the teacher can handle through all of these strategies. And if you need help, here's who you can talk to for these strategies. And then also, these are major problems, but the minor problems only become major after you've done these 3 things and not in the same day. And then it also kind of divides who needs to talk to admin and who needs to talk to Almika. And so making it very clear, but then starting with the why, starting with why are we doing this, and making a statement about compassionate discipline and moving in that direction. The school is looking for change, and they're saying these things haven't been working. And so what can we do to fix that? And so the good news is they have the mindfulness lady here. So I'm always shifting things. Berna, what is your question in the last 5 minutes we have?
Sorry, I don't have a question anymore because Vairumi and Jehan already addressed it. It's just that I'm in constant battle between admin and the teachers, because as you rightfully mentioned, that we are seen as the fixers and the people that know everything. All the teachers come to me and wanting me to solve some admin matters, for example, extra meetings or the duties that they have to do. And my school has this year really prioritized staff well-being. So I am doing my best to, do the mindfulness sessions and, whatnot, everything that we all do as counselors. However, I find sometimes very difficult to put certain boundaries between what I can help and what I can't help with. I say it very clearly, and I actually very honest. I tell them, I'm sorry, this is not something that I can help you with, but I am here to listen, and I give a small or a simple feedback to admin, but generally nothing changes because admin needs teachers to have that much of timetable, that load. So it's like, yes, I'm listening. Yes, I'm giving the feedback, but nothing really changes. So this is my frustration at the moment. particularly compounded, of course, with the fact that, you know, we are living in COVID times, that everything is restricted. We can't do any like socials, to just have some, you know, a breather. So I just wanted to vent out, like you said, am I here to vent out or ask a question or solve a problem? I'm just here to vent out.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I think we've created the space for that. So
Thank
it's
you.
cool.
Thank
I think we're all going through that. Jackie, so Jackie asked, is there a resource on compassionate discipline that is recommended? Not at the moment. I don't have one that we have created. And also Jahan had a question of, would I be able to share some of these examples of behavior policies? Were you asking like specifically with what we're doing or what our flowchart looks like? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned that compassionate discipline and stuff. So yeah.
Okay, so I'll answer both of yours at the same time. I am a reliant on Google, and then I just kind of adapt things the way. And so the funny thing is, Jackie says my book, possibly if I had time to write it. But when we were talking about it, I had heard of compassionate discipline, but I didn't really know much about it. And so when we were talking about the behavioral guidelines and things, that's what came up. And then the research happened afterward. But Jahan, most of those things are, so for us, the minor behaviors are like swearing, you know, going to the bathroom without permission. These were all things that we saw that teachers were referring to the counselor or admin, and we're like, this is not a huge issue. But the major ones were like students eloping, or, you know, intentionally hurting someone. And we also added emotional maltreatment to that, because it can teeter the line of bullying. So if someone is, because bullying is really difficult to operationalize in schools. You know, everyone's like, oh, they're bullying me, but you need to have a clear definition. And so those are some of those things. We're at the end of time. And so what I can do is I can add another document to the thing. So if you check back in the next few days, then I'll add some resources, or just kind of what I can kind of share with our behavioral guidelines. Okay.